Just imagine having a teddy bear as your trusty sidekick, or cruising around town in style with a cute nerdy chick riding shotgun. If a big buffoon like Mr. Bean can pull it off, so can you. But enough with the pep talk, it's time to cover Mr. Bean, the animated series from start to end in detail. In a snug flat right smack in Highbury, North London, lives our buddy Mr. Bean. Now, words aren't his thing, but boy, he is a pro at stirring up mischief with his selfish and childlike shenanigans. Being a Picasso of creating chaos, Mr. Bean often puts others in inconvenient situations, but the real punchline is that he is more of a risk to himself than anyone else. Like that one time when Mr. Bean's wild antics sent Mrs. Julia Wicket, the grumpy landlady, to the hospital after he serves down the stairs on an ironing board. Once he's left in charge of her grumpy cat Scrapper, chaos begins to unravel. Scrapper, being Satan's spawn, refuses to eat her food and instead eyes the innocent goldfish. In an attempt to save the goldfish from Scrapper's claws, Mr. Bean ends up with a vase on his head. Realizing that Scrapper is not a vegan, Mr. Bean tries to open a can of fish for her. But being the dumbass that he is, Bean puts the can in the microwave. As the microwave goes kaboom, Scrapper ends up stuck on a tree. I guess cats do have 9 lives for real, cause Mr. Bean's cat rescue operation sends Scrapper into outer space and then back on Earth. When Mrs. Wicket returns to a messy home, she gives Mr. Bean a beating of his life, and as Mr. Bean finds himself in an ambulance, he receives more beating, but this time from Scrapper. This isn't the only time Mr. Bean has run into trouble with Mrs. Wicket or her grumpy cat Scrapper. In the episode Dead Cat, Mr. Bean's day starts with an exciting plan to go to the beach. However, his plans are quickly derailed when Mrs. Wicket commands him to decorate the wallpapers of their house. She reminds him that it's decorating day and he must finish the task before he can head to the beach. Frustrated by this unexpected delay, Mr. Bean heads downstairs where he inadvertently closes the door on Scrapper's tail, causing the cat to yowl in pain. Scrapper, being the troublesome feline that he is, decides to make Mr. Bean's task even more challenging. He starts by ripping the newly applied wallpaper and stepping on the fresh paint, leaving his paw prints all over the floor. While Mr. Bean struggles to maintain control over his chaotic decorating project, Mrs. Wicket keeps an eye on his progress and even points to the grandfather clock. As for Mr. Bean, he finally reaches a breaking point and throws Scrapper into the trash bin, an action that has significant consequences. When Mr. Bean goes to the beach later, he watches in shock as the garbage collector takes away the bin, with Scrapper still inside. He quickly realizes the gravity of his actions and heads back home knowing that he's in trouble with Mrs. Wicket. Determined to right his wrong, Mr. Bean decides to buy a replacement cat for Scrapper. He visits a pet shop but struggles to find a suitable replacement as none of the cats resemble Scrapper. However, he eventually encounters a one-eyed cat that he believes could work as a replacement. Bean enters the cat's enclosure only to discover that the cat actually has 2 eyes, rendering it not suitable. His search continues until he encounters a cat named Puss. Although he wants to take Puss with him, the owner informs him that Puss is her own pet. Still determined to get the cat, Mr. Bean cleverly triggers the fire alarm in the shop, which opens all the cage doors and allows the cats to escape. In the midst of the chaos, Mr. Bean manages to escape with Puss. He brings Puss home, intending to pass the cat off as Scrapper. Mr. Bean creatively transforms Puss to look like Scrapper, cutting the excess fur and painting the cat black. He then presents Scrapper to Mrs. Wicket, who is initially delighted to have her cat back. However, things take a comedic turn when Scrapper starts displaying aggressive behavior. As Mrs. Wicket feeds the cat, she discovers fleas, leading to the unraveling of Mr. Bean's scheme. She realizes that the cat is not Scrapper and kicks Mr. Bean out of the house in anger. In a final twist, the real Scrapper returns home covered in garbage. With Scrapper's return, Mr. Bean believes he's finally free to go to the beach. Still, Mrs. Wicket insists that he must return Puss to its owner, who confronts Mr. Bean about the chaos he caused in her shop. She demands that he fix the mess, leading to a series of additional mishaps, including an encounter with a vengeful cat. The episode concludes with Mr. Bean, exhausted and pain-covered, struggling to complete his tasks as the sun sets, delivering a humorous and typical Bean ending. In this episode, Mrs. Wicket finally has enough of Mr. Bean's bony little butt and decides to throw him out. So what happens is that as night falls, Bean prepares for bedtime, eager to get a good night's sleep. But even this simple task proves to be an adventure in his quirky world. Mrs. Wicket sleepwalks into Bean's room. He tries various methods to wake her up, from throat clearing to alarm clocks and even clanging of pots and pans, and all to no avail. Bean, in desperation, decides to relocate Wicket back to her own room by cleverly tying her to her own bed. Then an unexpected turn of event occurs. Mrs. Wicket, under her own blanket, spots a nervous Bean hiding beneath it. And of course, no one wants to see Bean in their apartment at midnight. Perhaps the case would be different for Mrs. Wicket if Bean looked like Henry Cavill. Anyways, this enrages Mrs. Wicket, who ends up kicking Bean out. The following day, our homeless hero navigates a series of bizarre rental opportunities, each stranger than the last. From eccentric landlords to bizarre rules, Bean's quest for a new home is a roller coaster of odd encounters. Undaunted by the misadventures, Bean decides to rough it outdoors, where he learns to appreciate nature in his own unconventional way. Bean even uses a scarecrow's carrot nose to season his soup. But as fate would have it, Bean's old apartment is now for rent, and he decides to disguise himself as the new tenant. Bean's love for his apartment prevails over his dumbness as for the time ever. He cleverly schemes and manages to win Mrs. Wicket's trust, simultaneously getting his beloved apartment back. Ever wondered if this man has always been a silly little Bean? It's a question that inevitably pops up when witnessing a grown Bean engaging in complete dumb acts. So without further ado, let's dive straight into the time when Mr. Bean was just a little boy. The plot kicks off with Mr. Bean swiping a slice of Mrs. Wicket's chocolate cake without permission, leading to his escape and hideout in the attic. While in the attic, he stumbles upon some of his old belongings, including a bag he used as a kid and the head of a panda plushie. Mr. Bean's flashback takes us to a younger version of himself holding his beloved teddy and the panda plushie. He encounters young thieves who take an interest in his stuffed animals and end up damaging the panda plushie. This distresses young Bean, sparking a desire for revenge. He concocts a plan to disguise himself as a tall man, using his dad's clothes and long sticks as feet and hands to restore Teddy's honor. Now, less is known about Mr. Bean's father, as he was never really shown in the series. Probably he dipped on Mr. Bean, and that's why Mr. Bean acts like a complete nutjob. In the park, the thieves are about to toss young Scrapper into a lake. The tall man, young Bean being in disguise, confronts them, demanding the return of Teddy. He successfully scares the thieves away, and Teddy is safe once more. However, Scrapper attempts to bite the tall man's wooden feet. The narrative shifts to a scene with young Mrs. and Mr. Wicket sitting on a bench. Young Bean arrives with a caged Scrapper. Mrs. Wicket, intrigued, opens the cage and manages to tame Scrapper. She adopts him, leaving Mr. Wicket heartbroken. I guess some people are just destined to be cat ladies. Young Bean's mischief continues as he sneaks into Mr. Wicket's car, pretending to be the driver. A series of flashbacks show young Bean with his mom coming across his first car crush and receiving a toy car that closely resembles his dream car. Young Bean assembles his DIY car and enjoys a ride wearing a mask. The episode reaches a comical climax with the wedding of Mrs. Wicket and Mr. Wicket. Young Bean, completely oblivious, disrupts the wedding, causing chaos and almost catastrophic accidents. Mrs. Wicket's wrath descends upon him, and there I thought Mrs. Wicket is a wicked witch from the West, when all along she has been tormented by Mr. Bean. Right! Oh, but wait, there's more. Not only has Mr. Bean been a thorn in Mrs. Wicket's side, but his long-suffering girlfriend, Irma Gob, has also endured her fair share of Mr. Bean's wacky antics and occasional rudeness. Out of all the characters in the wild world of Mr. Bean, it's Irma who somehow manages to withstand Bean's zany antics, all thanks to the power of love. Or perhaps Irma, like a lot of us, has a thing for them red flags. Like Mr. Bean, Irma has a teddy bear named Lottie, who she repeatedly tries to set up with Teddy. However, Mr. Bean strongly opposes the pairing. There's a scene in the episode Birthday Bear where Irma takes Lottie, kisses Teddy, and this prompts Mr. Bean to grab Teddy, who he uses to hit Lottie. In response, Irma slaps Mr. Bean's hands. Well, I guess he doesn't want his one and only wingman to get lost in the sauce. This one time on Valentine's Day, Mr. Bean's romantic aspirations take an interesting twist as he tries to woo Irma. He starts by leaving her a mysterious Valentine's card at work, but things take a wrong turn when she mistakenly thinks it's from her colleague. In an unfortunate twist, Irma rewards the colleague with a kiss, much to Bean's dismay. But if there's one thing that's admirable about Mr. Bean, is his fierce determination. Determined to win her affection, Mr. Bean embarks on an unconventional date. However, what he sees as a delightful park rendezvous doesn't exactly match Irma's romantic expectations. Their picnic plans end with her hurling a sandwich to the ground in frustration. Mr. Bean then tries to propose to Irma with a small cucumber, which only escalates her irritation. In the world of pearls and diamonds, a cucumber ain't gonna cut it, buddy. Our hopeless romantic decides to win her heart with a claw machine game at a Valentine fun fair. The stakes are high as he competes with the pesky colleague. It all ends with the colleague snagging the heart-shaped prize, leaving Irma less than impressed by Bean. But the misadventures continue. As Mr. Bean pursues a fortune teller and other fairground games to make up for his earlier mishaps, the story unfolds. Irma's patience wears thin while Bean's determination persists. However, as he chases a raffle ticket that's caught in a series of ridiculous predicaments, including being hidden in a cooked lobster, things don't quite go his way. In the end, Bean's valiant efforts to win Irma's affection take an unexpected turn as the raffle ticket gets away. Irma kisses the colleague who had already won, and Bean, dejected but not defeated, retrieves a toy T-Rex from the trash as his consolation prize. It turns out this isn't the only time Mr. Bean has tried his hardest to win Irma back from another man. The day kicks off with Mr. Bean and Irma enjoying themselves in the park, savoring cool treats on a sunny day. While Irma tries to infuse romance into their date, Mr. Bean's unique perspective on life adds a charming twist, and by charming, I mean Bean avoiding Irma's affection like a plague, causing her to get upset. But this lady has the patience of Buddha, because soon she forgets all her frustration upon seeing a marquee advertising a movie titled Love at the local cinema and suggests that they watch it together. Despite initial reluctance, Mr. Bean submits. Irma provides him with a ticket and reminds him that the movie starts at 8 p.m. Back at home, as Mr. Bean busily irons his pants, he accidentally falls asleep while watching TV. He awakens an hour later, realizing he's running late to meet Irma. As Bean arrives at the cinema to find Irma waiting, he offers her the slightly damaged flower, a gesture of love which is damaged, as is his idea of love. While Irma becomes engrossed in the movie, even shedding tears over its sad moments, Mr. Bean remains disinterested. Instead of consoling his girlfriend, Bean finds solace in reading comics and eventually falls asleep during the film's climax. Irma attempts to shush Bean's snoring with comical tricks, like using popcorns as nose plugs. Their evening continues with dinner at restaurant La Cuisine. Disaster strikes when it's time to pay the bill, as Mr. Bean realizes he left his wallet at home. The restaurant's hunky musician pays the bill with his 20 pounds and dances with Irma. Mr. Bean returns too late and sees Irma dancing with the musician. Fueled by an outlandish misunderstanding, Mr. Bean embarks on a wild pursuit, believing Irma is inside the Reliant Regal. But this time, fate decides to save Mr. Bean's love life as the Reliant collides with the musician's car, causing the musician to act out. In the end, Irma joins Mr. Bean and they drive away, sharing a laugh. In another comical mishap, Mr. Bean's antics leave poor Irma so famished that she is driven to eat a rather unfortunate mouse. However, Mr. Bean dozes off in the bathtub, resulting in his turkey burning in the oven. He attempts to cook spaghetti but ends up accidentally sending it down the drain. In a desperate move, Mr. Bean tries to serve a bird as dinner, but it's too small, so he inflates it with an air pump. When that plan fails, Irma and Mr. Bean consider eating a nearby mouse. With a mind as brilliant as a flickering light bulb and a personality that could rival a rock, it's no surprise that Mr. Bean's social circle is limited to a single inanimate teddy bear. Bean even goes as far as to prepare an epic birthday for his teddy. Of course, the day was filled with a series of misadventures. So the episode kicks off with the anticipation of Teddy's birthday. Irma Gob goes the extra mile to create a celebratory atmosphere by preparing a cake for Teddy. She excitedly heads to Bean's apartment, but her enthusiasm is met with a snoozing Bean who fails to respond to her knock. Growing impatient, Irma resorts to leaving the cake and party supplies in Bean's room. She even leaves her bag behind and departs with the cake. The alarm clock blares at 9 a.m., jolting Bean awake. The day's surprise is revealed when Bean discovers the abandoned party preparations left by Irma, including a heartfelt birthday card meant for Teddy. The shock of having forgotten Teddy's special day gets to Bean as he quickly tries to come up with something. Soon, Bean's apartment becomes a hub of celebration with decorations and party supplies. As Bean continues to hustle, he stumbles upon a plan for an extravagant fireworks display at 9 p.m. Amid these preparations, Bean's journey takes him to a toy store, where he successfully manages to irk the living daylights out of the poor salesman. Following his toy store trip, Bean finds himself at a fast food restaurant, Rumps, which he enters with the intention of finding a meal suitable for Teddy's celebration. His quest, however, proves futile as none of the menu items appeal to him. Bean's ultimate choice, a purchase of ketchup for just 2 pence. Rude, selfish, and a cheapskate. The rap sheet ain't looking too good, Bean. The episode ends with an epic fireworks show. Irma, though initially annoyed by Bean's antics, eventually warms up to him as they share a delightful moment together. In another episode, Mr. Bean goes out of his way to rescue his friend, Teddy, from a pair of thieves. His day takes an unexpected turn when he comes across a news report featuring 2 notorious criminals, known as the Swarthies, who are involved in a bizarre crime spree stealing teddy bears. To protect Teddy from distressing news report, Bean quickly covers Teddy's eyes and switches off the television. Meanwhile, the swarthies are at their hideout, delighting in their theft of a teddy bear. They mocked a police officer featured in the news report while playfully manipulating the stolen teddy bear. Bean, unaware of the unfolding drama, embarks on a trip to the grocery store with Teddy in tow. While in the store, Bean loses track of Teddy, and his frantic search outside reveals that Teddy has been stolen by the very same swarthies he saw on TV. Determined to retrieve Teddy, Bean launches a wild pursuit, causing chaos on the road as he chases down the swarthies' van. After a day of searching, Bean finally spots Teddy perched on a tree branch. Relieved, he rescues Teddy and heads back home. However, his happiness is short-lived when he discovers that Teddy appears lifeless. Worried, Bean rushes to the veterinarian's office with Teddy, inadvertently causing a series of comic mishaps that involve a duck, a fish, a cat, and a dog. At the vet's office, it's revealed that Teddy is not Teddy at all, but a teddy bear coat with a strategically placed apple as its head. Bean's quest to find Teddy continues as he puts up missing Teddy posters. Later, at the police station, Bean attempts to post a missing Teddy notice, but is baffled by the numerous missing teddy bear posters already on display. Meanwhile, the swarthies have devious plans to modify teddy bears with sock ears. Bean's relentless search takes an unexpected turn when he encounters a boy with a teddy bear sporting unusual ears. Following the path of the boy, Bean discovers a van operated by the swarthies, where they are selling teddy bears with sock ears. Bean concocts a clever plan, using his car to outwit the swarthies and rescue Teddy, along with the other teddy bears. The episode concludes with the swarthies being apprehended, and Bean distributes the stolen sock ears to children as a consolation prize. Even though Teddy is merely an inanimate object, the genuine friendship between Teddy and Mr. Bean is 100% legit. Surprisingly, Mr. Bean also shares a fondness for animals, with the exception of cats, of course. In the episode Egg and Bean, Mr. Bean becomes the caregiver for a baby stork. Believing it's a baby T-Rex, he goes to great lengths to provide for it. Eventually, Bean helps the young stork learn to fly and releases it into the wild. Surprisingly, the stork returns with a mate to build a nest on Bean's roof. Guess what? The stork gave Bean his very own baby. In another episode, Mr. Bean faces all sorts of challenges, all in the hopes of reuniting a baby badger to his family. The episode kicks off when Mr. Bean encounters small pink creatures. These creatures are initially a mystery to him, and he becomes determined to figure out what they are. Unbeknownst to Mr. Bean, these pink creatures are baby European badgers. The two thieves, previously seen in the episode Missing Teddy, have been poaching these badgers and dyeing them pink to pass them off as exotic animals, selling them for profit. When Mr. Bean tries to alert the pet store owner about the pink creatures, the owner mistakenly thinks Mr. Bean is connected to the thieves and chases him away. Mr. Bean resorts to visiting the library to identify the pink creatures. There, he borrows a book about dogs, mistakenly thinking the creatures are some kind of rare dog. After realizing the truth, Mr. Bean follows the pink baby badger into the forest and discovers the two thieves poaching more badgers. He devises a clever plan to thwart their thieving and hands them over to the police while also reuniting the baby badger with his family. And so, once again, the day is saved, thanks to the Mr. Bean. While Mr. Bean's interactions with people might come across as somewhat unconventional, and by that I mean autistic, he is surprisingly good at crafting and creating things. Like on a cold winter night, Mrs. Wicket shows Mr. Bean the electric meter, which reveals that his power consumption is considerably higher than hers. She flips off Bean's main switch and locks the meter, leaving Bean in dismay. While she enjoys her cozy room and watches a wrestling show, Bean is left shivering in the cold. Frustrated by the lack of warmth, Bean reads a newspaper that reports the temperature is an astonishing minus 40 degrees Celsius. The news inspires him to build a wind turbine to generate electricity, and he begins sketching a plan. Finally, Bean completes his wind turbine and enjoys the return of power. Unfortunately, the wind turbine stops working during the night, leaving Bean in the dark and cold once again. The wind turbine's failure coincides with Bean's discovery that Wicket is experiencing an electricity shortage too. She connects her hairdryer to Bean's wind turbine without permission, overloading the system. Her hairdryer catches fire and Wicket rushes outside to extinguish the flames in the snow. Paramedics arrive to tend to Mrs. Wicket, and Bean seizes the opportunity to steal her keys, secretly unlocking the electricity meter. With the meter now open, Bean restores his power. In another episode, Mr. Bean becomes interested in painting and attempts to create a masterpiece using unconventional materials like ketchup, mustard, and more. He faces various challenges, including interference from animals and insects. Eventually, he manages to sell his paintings, but the customers are swarmed by flies due to the use of food in his artwork. Despite these mishaps, Mr. Bean finds a way to benefit from the situation, as one customer after another throws back the painting and he gets to keep their money. Only Bean can combine the art of swindling and painting like a pro. Upon delving into the world of Mr. Bean, it becomes evident that the true source of mischief is none other than Mr. Bean himself. Paradoxically, despite his role as an antagonist, the individuals around him manage to surprise him with a heartwarming surprise. In this one episode, the day begins with Mr. Bean feeling a sense of gloom on his birthday. When he opens his mailbox, he's met with a disappointing sight. Only bills and not a single birthday card to be found. Determined to turn things around, he decides to get a bit inventive. Using a cereal box, he carefully cuts it into the shape of a card, adds a few drawn candles for effect, and slips it into an envelope, creating the illusion of receiving a thoughtful birthday card. To complete the ruse, he even stages a fake present on the table using a flower pot. However, the real party is unfolding next door in Mrs. Wicket's apartment. Bean overhears the lively sounds of a birthday celebration and is eager to join in the fun. Unfortunately, the stern guard at the entrance doesn't recognize him and insists on seeing an invitation.
No invitation, no entry.
Bean makes multiple attempts to sneak past the guard, but each effort ends in failure. It's only when he gets a clever idea that things change. He borrows an invitation from an elderly woman, successfully tricks the guard, and makes his way inside. However, his triumph is short-lived as he's eventually discovered and unceremoniously thrown out. Back in his room, Bean can't help but feel dejected about missing out on the party. But then a letter hidden beneath his doormat reveals a surprising twist. He had an invitation all along. Brimming with newfound hope, he rushes back to the guard and proudly displays his invitation. He finally enters the party only to realize that he's fashionably late, as the celebration has already concluded.
Oh no!
Mrs. Wicket warmly welcomes him, revealing that the entire party had been organized in his honor. The bewildered guard comes to the realization that the man he had so firmly kept out was, in fact, the guest of honor. After going through a series of funny adventures, including a stint in jail and plenty of mishaps, Mr. Bean remains a fantastic show that always makes both kids and adults laugh. What's truly special is that Bean does all of this without speaking a single word. His humor transcends language barriers, making him beloved by people all around the world. Now, I'm curious, how did Mr. Bean impact your childhood? Make sure to let us know down in the comments, and as for everything else, drop us a like and do subscribe to our channel for more awesome tunes like this recapped on your feed. As always, thanks for watching. Peace.